The dark silence of space stretched infinitely in every direction as the Empire's flagship, Relentless, cruised through the outer reaches of the galaxy. Its sleek hull glinted under the faint light of distant stars, a symbol of the Empire's military supremacy. Inside, the crew maintained their usual routine, keeping the massive ship on course through the lonely void. But today something was different. It started with a whisper on the sensors, something faint, barely noticeable, just a ripple in the electromagnetic spectrum. But it was enough to get the attention of the command staff, a deep space anomaly, as they called it. Commander Tyra Darren, the ship's chief communications officer, leaned forward in her seat, frowning at the readings on her console. The signal was unlike anything she'd ever seen before. "I don't like this," she muttered to herself, eyes narrowing. The pattern was almost deliberate, too sophisticated for natural interference. She pinged the signal through the fleet's network, sending a report to General Olaris. Within minutes, Olaris entered the bridge, his eyes immediately locking onto the tactical display. He was a towering figure, with the cold demeanor of a man who had commanded for decades. His presence alone commanded respect, but even he could not hide the edge of concern in his voice as he stepped toward the sensor station. "What do we have?" Olaris asked, his sharp eyes scanning the data. Darren turned to him. "An encrypted transmission, General. It seems to be coming from a distant region, near the Zeta cluster. The signal itself is too advanced. It's like nothing we've encountered." Olaris's frown deepened. The Zeta cluster was on the fringes of Imperial territory, an uncharted expanse where few ships ventured. For something to appear there now was suspicious and a threat in the making. "Have we tried tracing the signal?" Olaris asked. Darren hesitated. "Yes, sir. But it's being bounced off multiple relay points. I can't pinpoint its origin. Whoever is sending this knows how to hide their location." Olaris's gaze hardened. The Empire had spent years securing its borders, building the most powerful fleet the galaxy had ever known. This kind of interference was beyond concerning. It was a direct challenge. He turned to his tactical officer, a young, nervous ensign. "Full scan of the area," Olaris ordered. "No more secrets. Find me that ship." The ensign worked quickly, his hands shaking as he inputted commands into the massive console. A few moments later, the screen flickered with a new set of data, an enormous object appearing on the edge of the Zeta cluster. "There it is, sir," the ensign reported, voice strained. "It's huge, and it's moving directly toward us." Olaris's pulse quickened. The ship's size alone was enough to make his blood run cold. There was no known vessel that could rival the Empire's fleet in sheer scale, at least not from any species they had catalogued. This was something new. "Status on weapons?" Olaris barked, his tone firm but measured. Darren's fingers flew over her console. "All systems are ready, General. But if it's hostile..." "Prepare for the worst," Olaris interrupted. "Alert the fleet. This could be an invasion." As the crew scrambled to execute his orders, a sense of unease settled over the bridge. Olaris watched the starry expanse on the view screen, his mind racing. Could this be a new enemy? One so powerful it had remained hidden for centuries? Or worse, could it be human? The Empire had long ago wiped out humanity, or so they thought. The history books were clear. Humanity was nothing more than a footnote, an extinct species, their civilizations destroyed in the first galactic conquests. Yet here now was a ship so impossibly advanced that it made Olaris question everything he thought he knew. He stood silently for a long moment, staring at the distant unknown. It wasn't a question of if the Empire would face a threat. The real question was who was behind that ship and were they ready for what was coming. The void outside the Relentless seemed to grow darker with each passing moment, as if the very universe was holding its breath. "Engage the fleet," Olaris finally said, his voice low and commanding. "Let's see who's bold enough to challenge us." As the fleet readied for battle, the distant ship continued its inexorable approach, unhindered, unstoppable, and utterly enigmatic. The tension on the Relentless was palpable as the Empire's fleet prepared to engage the mysterious ship. General Olaris stood at the helm, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out the viewports as the massive warship slowly closed in. His mind raced, trying to process the impossible. Could it be human? The Empire's archives on humanity were sparse and outdated, remnants of ancient history. They spoke of a species that had once sprawled across the stars, only to be wiped out centuries ago in a brutal campaign during the early years of the Empire's expansion. What remained of humanity was thought to be myth, the last echoes of a civilization crushed under the might of Imperial warships. And yet, here it was, a vessel that defied logic, challenging the very foundation of the Empire's power. Olaris turned sharply as Commander Tira Duran approached, her face a mask of grim determination. She handed him a datapad, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "General, I've completed a deeper scan of the ship. Its composition doesn't match anything we've ever encountered. The hull is made of an alloy that seems almost indestructible, stronger than anything we have in our arsenal. The power systems..." She paused, her brow furrowing. "It's running on a fuel source we can't even identify." Olaris's jaw tightened. This was worse than he'd feared. And the weapon systems? Darren's eyes flickered to the datapad again. The targeting systems are unlike anything in our database. It's almost as if the ship anticipates our movements before we make them. Whoever is piloting that vessel is no ordinary force. Olaris's thoughts darkened. Whoever it was, they were playing a game far beyond the Empire's understanding. "We'll need more data," Olaris said, his voice cold and commanding. "Send a drone to investigate. It's time we learned more about what we're up against." Duran nodded and turned to relay the order. Moments later, a drone was launched from the Relentless, small, stealthy, designed for reconnaissance. The ship moved silently into the darkness, heading straight toward the looming warship that continued its approach. Back on the bridge, Olaris's mind was spinning. Why now? The Empire had ruled for centuries with absolute authority. It had crushed rebellions, neutralized alien threats, and brought entire civilizations to heel. If humanity had survived, why hadn't they made their presence known sooner? What were they waiting for? The drone's live feed flickered on the display, and the crew gathered around, their attention rapt. The approaching ship was even more imposing up close, a sleek, angular behemoth with glowing blue engines that hummed with quiet power. It seemed to be alive, its surface pulsing with energy as if it were breathing. Suddenly the drone's feed went dark. No warning. No sign of destruction. It just vanished, the screen turning black. "Damn it," Duran hissed. "It's gone." Olaris's expression darkened. "They knew we were coming," he muttered under his breath. "We've underestimated them." "General," Duran said, her voice soft but insistent, "I think we need to consider something. This may not be a new species, it's possible. It's possible this ship belongs to humanity." Olaris's head snapped around. "That's impossible. Humanity is wiped out, yes, but there's a possibility they survived in secret. The archives are incomplete. You know that. What if this ship is a remnant of their lost civilization?" Olaris's pulse quickened. It can't be. But the evidence, however strange, was stacking up against the Empire's official records. The crew fell silent as the warship drew nearer. The enemy, whether it was human or something else, had not fired a single shot. The tension was unbearable. And then finally a message pinged through the comm system, its tone chilling in its simplicity. A cold, precise voice rang out. "This is Captain Selena Voss of the Terran starship Vanguard. Prepare for first contact." For a long moment, the bridge remained frozen in place. Olaris's eyes went wide. Terran, the ancient name for humanity. It was as if the past had come roaring back to life. Every instinct in his military mind screamed that they were facing an impossible enemy, but his heart could not ignore the truth. Humanity was back. "Seal the bridge," Olaris commanded, his voice calm but betraying the tension within. "Prepare for a response. It seems we're about to get a lesson in humility." The crew moved quickly, but Olaris remained still, staring out at the approaching ship. There was no turning back now. The Empire had faced countless enemies, but none like this. The game had changed, and the galaxy, his galaxy, would never be the same again. The atmosphere on the Relentless grew thick with anticipation as the unidentified warship, now identified as the Vanguard, continued its steady approach. Its form loomed on the view screen, bathed in the dim light of the distant stars. It was like a shadow drifting through space, silent, implacable, and seemingly unfazed by the Empire's growing presence. General Olaris stood at the command center, his gaze unwavering. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the back of his hand, a sign of the restlessness that had begun to gnaw at him. The ship's defiance was unnerving. It hadn't made any hostile moves, no weapons charged, no communication beyond that single cryptic message. It was as though it was waiting, watching, daring the Empire to make the first move. "Commander Darren," Olaris said, his voice steady but edged with tension. "What's the status on their propulsion system? Any fluctuations in energy?" Darren's fingers flew over the consoles, her brow furrowing in concentration. "No anomalies. General, the ship's propulsion system is stable, almost too stable. I've never seen such precision in a drive core before. It's as if it's not even using conventional energy. It's running off something entirely unknown. Can you analyze their shields?" "Already done, sir. Their shields are beyond our capabilities, General," Darren replied, her voice low with concern. "I've never seen anything like it. The energy signature suggests, I don't know. It's as if their entire hull is reinforced with some kind of energy field that's integrated into the structure itself. Our weapons couldn't even scratch it." Olaris's fists clenched. He had prepared for countless threats throughout his career, but this was beyond even his extensive experience. The Vanguard wasn't simply another adversary. It was something new, something alien, yet familiar. Humanity had been thought extinct for centuries. How had they come back with this level of technology? The ensign at the tactical station suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling. "General, they're moving again, direct course toward the Zeta Cluster's star systems. They're ignoring all our signals. No response." Olaris turned, his eyes narrowing. The Zeta Cluster was a strategic location, a key region in the Empire's defensive perimeter. The Empire had poured resources into its protection, and now here was an unknown enemy, seemingly moving in with impunity. "We have to act now, or we risk losing the initiative," Olaris said, his voice cool with resolve. "Prepare the fleet for engagement." A collective murmur ran through the crew as they scrambled to prepare the weapon systems. The tension was thick, but no one questioned the order. The enemy was close, too close for comfort, but just as the fleet began to align for a tactical maneuver, something utterly unexpected happened. The Vanguard's engines flared once more, and with a blinding surge of speed, it vanished. Not like a ship accelerating into hyperdrive, but as if it had simply melted into the fabric of space. The starry backdrop of the galaxy seemed to ripple and warp as the ship disappeared from sight in an instant, leaving the fleet in stunned silence. "What in the Emperor's name just happened?" Darren whispered, her voice barely audible over the stunned hum of the bridge. Olaris's mind raced. This wasn't like anything the Empire had ever encountered. Ships could move fast, but this was something other. The Vanguard had executed a maneuver that defied all known laws of physics, vanishing completely, leaving no trace. It was like it had folded space itself, slipping away into some unseen fold. "Status on their position?" Olaris demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. Ensign Rallick, the officer at the sensor station, worked quickly, his fingers dancing over the control panel. His brow furrowed with disbelief. "Sir, it's not possible, but I think they're behind us." A gasp rippled through the crew as everyone turned to the view screen. Sure enough, there, just a few kilometers off the Relentless's stern, the Vanguard appeared once more. Silent, unbothered, and now positioned at the most vulnerable point in the fleet's formation. "It's mocking us," Olaris muttered, his voice low but deadly. He gripped the railing in front of him, his jaw tight with frustration. "They're not afraid of us. Not even a little. The crew was silent, feeling the weight of Olaris's words. Whoever was on that ship, whoever had come, back from humanity's forgotten past, had a clear message. They weren't here to negotiate or to be cowed. They were here to remind the Empire of a past it had tried to bury. And as the vanguard loomed closer, Olaris realized they might very well be on the verge of an encounter that would forever alter the course of the galaxy. "Raise shields," Olaris ordered, his voice a cold command. "Prepare to defend our position. Let's see if they make their move." But the ship remained still, as if waiting, watching, like a predator waiting for its prey to make the first mistake. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the two warships stood in space, facing each other, separated only by the vast emptiness between them. It wasn't just a test of firepower anymore. It was a test of wills. The tension on the Relentless was suffocating. The enemy ship, the Vanguard, hovered just beyond their firing range. Its eerie silence was unsettling, the unnatural stillness of the vast void pressing in on the crew as they waited, each second stretching into eternity. General Olaris stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the view screen, the calculated fury in his gaze betraying the calm he was trying to project. He knew that the slightest misstep could turn this standoff into a full-scale battle. It wasn't just the size or the firepower of the Vanguard that unsettled him. It was the unknown. Humanity's return was more than just a threat. It was an existential challenge to everything the Empire had built over centuries. "We've been stationary for too long," Olaris said, breaking the silence. His voice was low but firm. "Command, prepare the fleet. Ready all weapons. We'll force them to reveal their intentions." He turned toward Darren. "Fire a warning shot. Let's see how they react." Darren's fingers hovered over her console, then she pressed a series of keys. A moment later, a pulse of energy shot. From the Relentless, a brilliant beam of plasma streaking toward the Vanguard. It was a clean shot, designed to hit, but not destroy. A clear signal that the Empire was ready for combat, but not yet ready to escalate to full war. The pulse traveled through the blackness of space, illuminating the area around the Vanguard for a split second. But instead of evading or retaliating, the enemy ship did something Olaris couldn't have anticipated. It didn't move. The beam slammed into the shields of the Vanguard, and for a brief moment, Olaris thought he saw the shimmering light of the shield flicker, but it held, almost, like it had absorbed the shot entirely. And then, just as quickly, the ship vanished again as if the shot had never been fired. "What just happened?" Darren gasped, her fingers frozen on the console. "They're shields. They've adapted to our fire." Olaris clenched his jaw, his blood running cold. The Vanguard hadn't just absorbed the shot. It had done so with an ease that defied logic. It was as if the ship had expected the attack, as if it had been prepared for it in a way no ship in the Empire's fleet could be. And then came the counterattack. The Vanguard flickered back into view, now mere kilometers from the Relentless. In the span of a heartbeat, the enemy ship unleashed a devastating barrage of energy blasts, each one crackling with a raw, unnatural intensity. The blasts tore through space with terrifying speed, striking the Relentless with pinpoint accuracy. A secondary explosion rocked the ship, throwing the crew into a brief moment of chaos as alarms blared and red lights flashed. "Shields at 70%, the ensign at the tactical station shouted. "Direct hit on our port side." Olaris's eyes narrowed. The Vanguard's weapons were unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. The energy pulses didn't just impact the ship, they disintegrated portions of the hull, leaving behind a glowing, scorched afterimage in their wake. The Relentless was already taking damage, and they hadn't even been able to land a second shot. "Return fire," Olaris barked, his voice cutting through the panic. "Target their engines. We need to disable them now." The fleet's remaining ships moved into position, unleashing their own retaliatory strikes. But again, the Vanguard was a ghost. It dodged with unnatural precision, its movements almost too quick for the eye to follow. It wasn't just fast. It was anticipating their moves, almost as if the ship could see the future. "Sir," "We've lost contact with the drone squadron," Darren called out, her voice laced with disbelief. "It's as if the Vanguard is jamming. Our communications, everything's being blocked." Olaris's expression darkened. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight to preserve the very integrity of the Empire's military. Humanity, if it was indeed humanity, had learned how to survive in ways the Empire could not understand. And this ship, whatever it was their message. "Regroup and form a defensive perimeter," Olaris commanded. "We can't let them tear us apart like this. Focus fire on their propulsion systems." As his fleet maneuvered into formation, the Vanguard struck again, this time with precision targeting. Energy blasts raked across the Relentless's shields, causing another massive explosion on the starboard side. The hull groaned under the pressure, but the shields held, for now. The Empire's ships retaliated, but their shots seemed to do little more than paint streaks of light across the Vanguard's hull, as if the ship were covered in some sort of energy field that absorbed and redirected the fire. Duran's face turned pale as she looked at Olaris. "They're playing with us, sir. They know our every move. We can't win like this." Olaris gritted his teeth, watching as the Vanguard danced around their attacks, effortlessly evading their fire. The once proud Empire was being tested in ways it had never been before. And then, just when Olaris thought it couldn't get worse, the enemy ship did something even more unexpected. On the view screen, the Vanguard's shields flared with energy, then collapsed in a pulse of blinding light. The ship didn't seem to take damage. Instead, it reconfigured itself, folding into a new form, its structure shifting in ways that defied basic engineering principles. Olaris could only stare in stunned silence. The battle was no longer about weapons or firepower. The Vanguard was a creature of its own design, alive in ways they hadn't even begun to understand. And as the Relentless struggled to stay in the fight, Olaris knew one thing for certain. This was not just the beginning of a war. It was the beginning of the end for the Empire. The first shots had been fired, but the true test was yet to come. The bridge of the Relentless was a cacophony of alarms and desperate orders as the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship. The impacts from the Vanguard had torn through the hull in several places, and even though the shields held for now, the damage was undeniable. General Olaris stood at the center of it all, his cold gaze locked on the shifting form of the enemy ship, now in its altered configuration. "Status report," Olaris barked, turning to his senior officers. His voice was steady, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just a fight, it was a complete redefinition of warfare. "Shield integrity at 50%, General," Duran called out from the communication station. "We've lost communication with 2 of the destroyers in our rear flank. The Vanguard's jamming systems are overpowering our networks." She paused, her hands flying over the console, trying to reroute power. "We're blind. Our sensors can't track them anymore." Olaris's jaw clenched. The Vanguard had not only demonstrated superior firepower, but it was now disabling their technological edge, rendering their advanced systems useless. The irony of it didn't escape him. They had the might of the galaxy at their fingertips, and yet they were powerless against this mysterious adversary. "We can't keep playing defense," Olaris muttered to himself. "We need a counterattack, something unpredictable." He turned sharply to Darren. "Initiate an EMP burst, disrupt their systems, if only for a moment. Give us a chance to hit them." Darren hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console. "General, an EMP burst will disable our systems too, and I don't care." Olaris interrupted, his voice unyielding. "We're running out of options. We have to take a risk." She nodded reluctantly and began the sequence. A low hum filled the bridge as the ship's power system surged, building the necessary charge for the burst. Outside, the Vanguard hovered like a predator, its pulsing energy shields shifting constantly, adapting to every attack. It was no longer about brute force. It was about survival. A flash of light lit up the space surrounding the Relentless, and a wave of electromagnetic pulses sent ripples through the void, impacting the Vanguard directly. The ship faltered, its form momentarily flickering in and out of focus. For a split second, Olaris allowed himself a breath of hope. Could it be? Was the Vanguard vulnerable after all? But then, to Olaris's horror, the enemy ship did something utterly impossible. It adapted. The Vanguard's shields rippled in waves, absorbing the EMP pulse as if it were just another part of the environment. The ship didn't just withstand the attack, it evolved, its systems recalibrating in real time, counteracting the disruption with an efficiency that left Olaris speechless. "Sir, they've reversed the pulse," Duran exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Their systems are absorbing everything we throw at them. It's like they learn from every attack." Olaris felt a chill run down his spine. This was no longer just a battle of firepower. It was a battle of intellect, of strategy. The Vanguard was a ship, yes, but it was also something far more dangerous. A mind or a program that could outthink them at every turn. It was alive in ways they could never have prepared for. "General, I have an idea," Duran said quickly, her voice tinged with a mix of desperation and excitement. "It's risky, but if we can coordinate our fire with the fleet, targeting specific weak points, we might be able to overwhelm their adaptability. If we surprise them..." Olaris nodded before she could finish. "Do it. We have no other choice." The crew worked in a flurry of action, coordinating their strike through the Relentless's remaining functional channels. The fleet, despite their disarray, began to synchronize their fire, targeting the Vanguard in a way that would keep it guessing. It wasn't about strength anymore. It was about speed, about precision, and about outsmarting an opponent that seemed to have every advantage. For a brief moment, the Vanguard hesitated, flickering like a glitch in the Matrix. A sign of weakness? Olaris didn't know, but he wasn't about to waste the opportunity. "Fire now," he commanded, his voice filled with authority. The fleet launched a barrage of energy blasts, synchronized to hit multiple targets in rapid succession. The Vanguard's shields flickered in response, each blast impacting at different points along its surface. The ship swerved, trying to predict the next strike, but the Empire's forces were relentless, pressing their advantage. For the first time, the Vanguard seemed to struggle. Direct hit on their port side. "Shields are destabilizing," one of the ensigns shouted. Olaris felt a flicker of triumph. "We've got them." But it was too early to celebrate. The Vanguard would adapt again. It always did. Then, just as the Vanguard was reeling, a new message flashed across the comms. It wasn't a warning nor a threat. It was a simple sentence, cold and emotionless. "We are not here to conquer." The words hung in the air, unsettling in their finality. Olaris's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't about an invasion. This was something far more complicated. The Vanguard wasn't a force of destruction, it was a message. "Explain yourself." Olaris shouted into the comms, but there was no immediate response. The ship simply hovered, as silent and enigmatic as ever. The galaxy, it seemed, was about to learn a truth it had long forgotten. Humanity's return was not just about power. It was about something deeper, something that could undo everything the Empire had built. Olaris gritted his teeth. The war had only just begun, and it would force the Empire to confront its past in ways it was unprepared for. The message had been delivered. Now the true test would begin. The Relentless hummed with the low groan of its damaged systems as Olaris stared at the blank comm screen. The words from the Vanguard still echoed in his mind. "We are not here to conquer." He could feel the weight of those words pressing down on him, their meaning far heavier than any weapon. The silence stretched on as the fleet maintained its position. The Vanguard loomed ahead, its shape still shifting slightly, its energy shields flickering like a living thing. It was as if the ship itself were a sentient being, aware of its power and fully in control of the situation. The Empire's best efforts had barely left a scratch on it, and the Vanguard had yet to respond with any further aggression. It was watching, waiting. "General," Duran said softly, her voice filled with an underlying tension. "They're not attacking. They've just stopped." Olaris's eyes narrowed as he turned toward her. "Why would they stop? We've made our position clear. They've shown they can obliterate us at any moment. They've given us a warning." "Maybe it's not a warning," Duran replied, shaking her head. Maybe it's a test. They're trying to gauge our response, see how far they can push us. Or perhaps they've already decided the outcome, Olaris said darkly, turning back to the view screen. This isn't just a military engagement, Tyra. It's a message. And I'm starting to wonder if we're the ones being tested. As the seconds ticked by, the tension aboard the Relentless grew unbearable. The fleet was in a precarious position, no longer engaged in a full-on battle, but caught in a dangerous standoff with a force that knew them better than they knew themselves. Olaris had spent his entire career fighting enemies who were predictable, who obeyed the laws of war. The Vanguard was different. It was playing a game they hadn't even learned the rules to. A sudden flash broke the silence, a ripple in space, near the Vanguard. For a moment, Olaris thought the ship might be preparing to fire again, but instead, something else happened. A smaller craft, sleek and dark, detached itself from the massive warship, gliding effortlessly toward the Relentless. The shuttle was silent, but the message was clear. It was a diplomatic envoy, or so it seemed. No weapons visible, no signs of aggression, just a small craft, slowly advancing. "General, they're sending something," Darren said, her voice tight with uncertainty. "A shuttle. Should we intercept it?" Olaris gritted his teeth. What is this? Everything in his military training told him to prepare for an ambush, but something in the pit of his stomach told him that this wasn't the same as any other conflict he'd faced. The Empire had spent years squashing uprisings, tearing through rebellious factions, but humanity, if that's truly who they are, was different. They weren't here to fight, or at least not in the way the Empire expected. "No," Olaris said, his voice firm but hesitant. "Let it come. But keep your weapons ready. We don't know their intentions." As the shuttle drew closer, the crew of the Relentless held their breath, unsure of what to expect. The tension was unbearable. Was this a trap? Or were the humans, if that's who they were, seeking something more? Something deeper than war? The shuttle docked with the Relentless's bay with a soft thud, and moments later the hatch opened. A single figure emerged, dressed in a dark uniform with insignia that was foreign and unfamiliar to everyone aboard. The figure was tall, with an almost regal presence, moving with a grace that suggested immense control. As they stepped forward, their eyes, sharp and intelligent, met Olaris's. "My name is Captain Selena Voss," the figure said, her voice cool and calm. "I've come on behalf of the Terran Collective. We seek a peaceful resolution." The words hit Olaris like a punch to the gut. Terran Collective? The humans weren't extinct. They had evolved beyond anything the Empire could have imagined. The very term collective spoke volumes. This wasn't an empire. This was something new, something that had outgrown the traditional concept of power. A collective. Could it be? Humanity, unified, reshaped into something entirely different? The crew of the Relentless stood frozen, eyes locked on the figure who had come to represent everything they feared. Olaris could feel the tension in the room as he stared at Captain Voss, his mind reeling. "You are humans," Olaris said slowly, his voice barely a whisper, as if he still couldn't quite believe it. "I thought you were destroyed, wiped out centuries ago." Voss smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Many thought that, General, and perhaps we were. But we have survived, and we have evolved. The galaxy has changed, and so have we." Her words were almost too much to comprehend. The humans, if this was indeed humanity, had adapted in ways the Empire could not fathom. This wasn't a single ship seeking vengeance, it was an entire civilization, hidden and forgotten, waiting for the right moment to return. But why now? "I have no interest in fighting you, General," Voss continued, her voice unwavering. "But we need to talk. This war, this constant fighting, it has to end. And it ends now before it consumes the galaxy." Olaris's heart raced, his mind torn between disbelief and the raw truth in her voice. He had been trained to conquer, to defeat enemies before they could speak. But this was different. This was humanity, returned not to conquer, but to dismantle the very systems of power the Empire had built. The weight of history pressed down on him. Could this be the end of the Empire as he knew it? Voss stepped forward, her eyes never leaving. Will you listen, General? Or will you force us to remind you why the Empire was never meant to last? The question hung in the air, heavy with promise and consequence. The future of the galaxy now rested in the balance. General Olaris stood motionless, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The quiet, calm presence of Captain Selena Voss contrasted sharply with the storm that raged inside him. He had always believed the Empire was invincible, that their centuries of dominance were etched into the very fabric of the galaxy. But standing before him was undeniable proof that the universe had moved on. Humanity was no longer the primitive species it had once been. It had become something far more formidable, something Olaris didn't yet understand. The tension in the air was palpable. The crew of the Relentless stood frozen, watching the interaction unfold as if waiting for a signal to act. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on them. This wasn't just a confrontation with an alien species. This was humanity, returned, and they were here to negotiate. Why now? Olaris finally asked, his voice low, strained. Why reveal yourselves to the Empire after all this time? Captain Voss's expression remained impassive, her eyes steady and unwavering. She stepped forward slightly, her posture confident, but not threatening. The galaxy is changing, General. The old ways are dying. The Empire is built on a foundation of control, fear, and subjugation. But those days are over. The universe has grown beyond that. Humanity, what's left of us, has spent centuries rebuilding, evolving. And now we are asking for the galaxy to move forward, not backward. Olaris clenched his fists, the words stinging like acid. The Empire had been built on principles of order, strength, and unity. His entire life had been devoted to maintaining that order, to enforcing the rule of law across a galaxy that had once been fragmented and chaotic. Now, this woman stood before him, representing the very force that threatened to unravel everything he had fought for. And what do you expect from us? Olaris asked, his voice rising with controlled anger. You want us to just let go? To accept your presence in the galaxy as if you have the right to rewrite history? You've been gone for centuries. We've fought, bled, for everything we've built. And you think you can just waltz in and tell us to change? Captain Voss didn't flinch. You've fought, yes. But at what cost? The Empire's methods of control have led to endless wars, suffering, and devastation. The galaxy is broken, General, and you know it. Humanity didn't return to fight your battles. We came because the galaxy needs a new path forward. A path that doesn't revolve around subjugation and violence. A path that embraces unity, progress, and cooperation. Olaris's mind raced. His thoughts flashed to the countless worlds the Empire had brought into its fold. Worlds that had resisted, at first, only to be crushed under the weight of imperial might. He thought of the countless lives lost in those wars, the suffering he had witnessed firsthand. But he also remembered the order, the stability, the sense that under the Empire's rule, the galaxy was safe. Or at least, that's what they had always been told. What do you want then? Olaris demanded, his voice barely masking the underlying desperation. A new order? A new government? Do you expect us to just abandon everything we've built for your collective? Captain Voss's eyes softened, but only slightly. We don't expect you to abandon anything, General, but we can't continue down the path we're on. The Empire, as it stands, is a relic of the past, a system built on division and conquest. The universe has changed, and we've learned from our mistakes. What we want is a new partnership, a new framework, for cooperation, where power is not a tool of oppression but a means to create a better future for all. There was a moment of silence as the weight of her words sank in. Olaris could feel his grip on the reality he had known for so long slipping. This wasn't an invasion. It wasn't an attack. It was a proposal, a challenge to everything the Empire had stood for, and everything he had ever known. The crew around him shifted uncomfortably, some of them clearly uncertain about the direction this conversation was taking. Olaris knew that his next words would carry the weight of the galaxy itself. The future was in his hands, but how could he make such a decision? The Empire's foundations were built on control, on unyielding strength. How could he just let go of that as Voss suggested? Why should I trust you? Olaris finally asked, his voice low and cautious. You come here telling me that everything we've worked for is wrong, that the Empire needs to end. How do I know this isn't just another form of conquest, one disguised in the guise of diplomacy? Voss regarded him with an intensity that spoke volumes. Because we have no interest in conquest. The war is over, General. The Empire may have won battles in the past, but it is losing the war for the future. We don't seek to control, we seek to heal. We seek to move forward. Olaris stood in silence, torn between the weight of his duty and the compelling truth in her words. The galaxy had already changed, but could he change with it? Or would he be a relic of the past, clinging to a dying empire? The tension in the room grew unbearable as Olaris wrestled with his own mind. Every instinct he had trained for, the tactics, the strategies, the missions, had been aimed at maintaining power. But this was different. Humanity had returned not with an army but with a vision, and that vision was something the Empire could no longer ignore. Then show me, Olaris said finally, his voice steady but filled with doubt. Show me that the galaxy can truly be something better, that it isn't just an illusion. Captain Voss nodded, her expression resolute. We will, General. But it starts with understanding that the future cannot be built on the past. Olaris took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. It was the first step into a future he could no longer deny, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The words that hung in the air were heavy, each syllable a call to change, a call to something Olaris had never truly considered, the possibility that everything he had fought for could be wrong. The future of the galaxy rested in the delicate balance between old and new, between the Empire's unyielding power and humanity's vision for something better. The silence in the room was broken only by the hum of the Relentless's failing systems. Outside, the vanguard loomed like a sentinel, waiting, patient. Captain Voss's steady gaze met Olaris's, and for the first time in his life, he felt a deep uncertainty. Was this a moment of reckoning for the galaxy or just another battle waiting to unfold? General, Duran said, her voice almost a whisper, we can't just let this go. The Empire won't stand for this. They'll call it treason. Olaris shot her a sharp look, silencing her immediately. He could see the worry in her eyes, but something deeper was stirring within him. A spark of curiosity. A faint sense that this conversation with Voss could be the beginning of something far more significant than a simple negotiation. You're right, Olaris finally said, his voice tight. The Empire may not accept this, and perhaps they never will. But the Empire has always been built on fear, on control. I've spent my life fighting for that system, believing that it was the only way to bring order to the galaxy. But I've seen too many lives destroyed by it. Too many worlds turned into ashes because of our insatiable hunger for dominance. His voice faltered for a moment, as if the weight of his words had finally reached him. Perhaps it's time for something different. Something new. Captain Voss nodded. You're beginning to understand, General. Humanity's return wasn't to conquer. It was to offer an alternative. But we can't do it alone. The galaxy is too divided, too fractured. We need allies who are willing to see the truth. That power must be shared, that the old ways of war, oppression, and control no longer have a place in the universe. Olaris took a slow breath, his mind racing. And if the Empire refuses, if they turn their guns on us, then we will face them, but we won't fight them as enemies, Voss said calmly. We will offer them the same choice we're offering you. The galaxy cannot continue to live in the shadow of empires. It must evolve. The weight of her words hit Olaris like a blow. This wasn't just about a single ship or a single battle. It was about the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The power dynamics that had existed for centuries were crumbling, and humanity wasn't the invader. It was the harbinger of change. Olaris turned away, his eyes scanning the view of the stars outside. The Relentless's bridge. For the first time in his life, he felt the burden of leadership differently. The safety and security of the Empire had always been his guiding star, but now he saw the cracks beneath its foundation. "Do you truly believe this can work?" Olaris asked, his voice rough. "A galaxy without empires, without control? Is that even possible?" Voss stepped closer, her gaze steady. "It's the only way forward. The Empire was a great force, but it's built on the bones of countless destroyed lives. We don't want to destroy what's left. We want to rebuild it. To guide it into a future where war is no longer the answer." Olaris felt the enormity of the decision pressing on him. If he agreed to this, everything he had known would be upended. The Empire's influence would begin to wane, its stranglehold on the galaxy's fate loosened. His position would no longer be one of unquestioned authority. It would be one of negotiation, of collaboration. And yet there was a part of him that saw the merit in Voss's words. The Empire had always been about control, and that control had come at a devastating cost. The universe wasn't a place for endless conquest and bloodshed. There had to be another way. Perhaps humanity, this evolved, united force, was the key to finding that way. Olaris turned back to Voss, his expression resolute. "I will speak with my leaders," he said, his voice firm. "The Empire will not be easy to change, but I will see if your vision is truly possible, if this new path is one we can walk together." Voss gave a single nod, her eyes filled with quiet respect. "That's all we ask. The future is in your hands, General. The galaxy's future." Olaris stood silently for a moment, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He had spent his entire life in service to an empire that had promised peace through domination. But now, as the stars stretched out before him, he saw the possibility of something more. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new era, one where the galaxy could finally rise above the shadows of its past. The Relentless was still in space, still wounded, still reeling from the engagement. But Olaris knew that, for the first time in his life, he was at a crossroads. A new dawn was rising for the galaxy, and the choices made today would echo for centuries to come.